Well, we can go ahead and get started. I'm sure a few more people might trickle in over the next couple of minutes, but I wanted to thank you all for coming. My name is Bailey Wary. I work in the Office of Research Integrity, and I'm the IRB coordinator. And today we're going to talk about the IRB. The Office of Research Integrity ensures that research conducted at UTC is in compliance with university, state, and federal regulations. And specifically, we oversee the administration of the Institutional Review Board, that's the IRB, the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committee, Export Control, and Research Misconduct. Today, we are here to learn about the Institutional Review Board, the IRB. Just out of curiosity, how many of you are familiar with the IRB? Great. How many of you have submitted an application before? Okay, so this will be maybe a bit of a refresher for you, but I'm glad to see you all here. Today's presentation is going to be an overview of what the IRB is, how to determine if it applies to your project, and the procedures to secure IRB approval. And we'll end the presentation with a question and answer session, so make sure to jot down any questions that may pop into your head as we go along, and make sure to ask them at the end. Okay, what is the Institutional Review Board? The IRB exists to protect human participants, also called human subjects, who are involved in research. Currently, the IRB committee is composed of 15 professors and community professionals. They represent a broad range of professional disciplines, backgrounds, ethnicities, and genders. This committee is responsible for reviewing and approving all research activities associated with UTC that involve human subjects. It's important to realize that the IRB is not unique to UTC. Not only is the IRB a good idea, but it is also federally mandated and operates under the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services regulations for the protection of human subjects. Let's be clear, the IRB only oversees research projects that involve human participants. So it's important to understand these terms and decide whether or not they apply to your project. Research is defined as a systematic investigation designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge or to contribute to the general body of knowledge. And human participants, they are defined as living individuals about whom an investigator conducting research obtains data through intervention or interaction with the individual or identifiable private information. Here are some examples of projects that may meet the definition of human subjects research: interviews, surveys, observations, case studies, and analysis of existing data. Keep in mind that these activities only need to be monitored by the IRB if they are done with the intent to contribute to generalizable knowledge, which typically includes dissemination of the results, such as publications or conferences. UHAN theses are published. Master's thesis, all these are published documents. Presenting at research dialogues, that would be a conference kind of thing, so it would be published as well. Yeah?
Yeah, I just don't understand how analysis of existing data can also be subject of IRB.
If it's existing data that was gathered from human subjects.
But it means existing data means somebody else already collected already.
Correct.
Still I have to go through the IRB if I want to use existing data.
Correct. You're going to be using it, so it's going to go through the IRB. Now, those are exempt, right? Just making sure, yeah. Those are exempt, so they go through a fairly quick process of review. But yeah, we just need to make sure that the data you are using is de-identified and the confidentiality or anonymity of the subjects is protected, just to make sure that everything is going to protect those human participants. Okay. What about student research? So sometimes students are confused as to whether or not their project that is being completed for class needs to be approved by the IRB. So to determine the answer to that question, ask yourself these questions. Do the results have the potential to be published or presented outside the classroom or off campus? And is the activity defined as a research project with a research question or hypothesis? If the answer is yes to any of these questions, the student should submit an application to the IRB. All right. Some class-related activities involving human subjects do not require individual review by the IRB. Classes that exist to teach about research methods but do not seek to contribute to the academic body of knowledge through dissemination of results do not require individual IRB review. These projects may require students to design and complete a research project but have no intention to have students submit their results to the public beyond the classroom. In these situations, instructors are responsible for the protection of human subjects. Faculty instructors must have completed the IRB training and have filed a classroom activity application with the IRB. Note that no project that involves more than minimal risk to the participants or involves vulnerable subjects may be dealt with under this procedure. And vulnerable subjects, we'll talk a little bit more about them, but that includes children or mentally ill people or other vulnerable populations. Okay. So when we say that the IRB monitors research to ensure that human participants are being protected, what are we looking for? In short, the IRB is looking to make sure that physical, emotional, financial, and social risks to the human subjects are minimized. The potential benefit of the research is greater than the potential risks to the participants. Participants are selected in a fair and equitable manner. Participants are fully aware of the possible risks and benefits of participating in the research and document their consent. Participants can be ensured that their privacy, confidentiality, and safety will be protected, and vulnerable subjects, such as children, mentally ill persons, inmates, and victims, are protected with special safeguards. If you are affiliated with UTC in any capacity and you plan to conduct research with human subjects, you need to get your project approved by the IRB before you begin research. Projects must be approved regardless of whether or not the research is funded. So after considering all of that information, you've decided that your project does require IRB approval. What should you do next? You can visit our website, utc.edu/IRB, and you will download and complete the application for review of research involving human subjects, which we call Form A. And then you will email your application to instrb@utc.edu. The IRB application asks you to discuss and describe your project in detail. It is broken down into these categories: privacy, confidentiality, subject population, methods, procedures, background and rationale for the study, risks and benefits, the purpose and objectives of the research, and incentives. The form is designed to be completed online. The blank spaces provided for your answers should expand with the amount of text you enter. If they do not, please attach additional pages as needed. The blank areas are not representative of the expected length of your answer. You are also requested to attach any survey instruments, consent forms, and permission letters, or other applicable documents. Keep in mind that the committee is composed of members who may not be in your field of study, so you want to make sure your terms can be understood by someone not familiar with your discipline. Please keep your language clear, concise, and free of jargon. In the next few slides, we'll take a look at what each section of the application asks. So the purpose, objectives of research. State the purpose of the research and the problem to be investigated. When possible, state specific hypotheses to be tested or specific research questions to be answered. Relevant background and rationale for the research. This section should present the context of the work by explaining the relation of the proposed research to previous investigations in the field. Include citations for relevant research. Provide at least twice as many peer-reviewed citations as lay citations. Methods and procedures. Describe what you are going to do and how you are going to do it. Be specific. And if part of a larger project, describe in detail only the research procedures that involve human subjects. Subject population. Provide the number of participants that will be involved in the research. State who the study participants will be and how they will be recruited. Vulnerable populations require special care and considerations. These include children, mentally impaired persons, pregnant women, and inmates. And on the form, it has a place for you to select any of those populations that you're including. Incentives. What incentives will be offered, if any? In general, financial incentives may be offered to reimburse the cost of participation. For example, transportation costs, parking expenses, meals. However, incentives should not unduly influence a person's choice to participate. If you want to award extra credit points to students for participation, be careful. If extra credit is to be given, then all students should have the opportunity to receive extra credit regardless of participation. Students should have an equal opportunity to earn extra credit points, such as a written response, an extra assignment, etc. Keep in mind that the student's time and effort should be equivalent to participation in the study. All right, risks, benefits to participants, and precautions to be taken. List all possible risks and discomforts from participation in the study, indicating both the severity and likelihood of occurrence. Discuss how these risks will be minimized. And if subjects are vulnerable populations or if risks are more than minimal, please describe what additional safeguards will be taken. And another note in this, you do want to include a mention of the benefits. If not benefits to the participants, then at least discuss the benefits to other people or the benefits to knowledge or whatever benefits are involved in the research. Always put something in this section of the application. If you feel there is no risk, then at least include the language, "This research involves minimal risk." A note on risks: there are many kinds of risks. Although the first thing that comes to mind may be physical harm, a participant can be harmed in many ways that may not be so easy to recognize, such as financial risks, physical risks, criminal, civil liability, employment risk, stigmatization, insurability, embarrassment. These are just some of them. All right. Privacy confidentiality. Describe how the privacy confidentiality of the participants will be maintained. Anonymous versus confidential. Data cannot be both anonymous and confidential. Anonymous means that the identity of the subject cannot be linked to the data by anyone, by the researcher or the public. Confidential means that while the identity can be linked to the data by the researcher, the public will be unable to identify the subject. So you've gotten signed consent forms, you know that these people are participating. You'll want to keep those stored separately from the data that you gather from those participants, hopefully, or in some way keep it where their confidentiality is not likely to be breached, but you do know the participants. Okay, think about data generated. What is it? Surveys, medical records, test data, coded identity lists, those are all forms of data. There are physical and electronic data. Think about paper surveys, files, electronic surveys, spreadsheets, emails. Where will it be stored? What's the physical location? If transporting the data, how will it be secured in transit? Who will have access to the data? The researcher, the faculty advisor, student help, maybe? Are computers password protected? And what if the computer gets stolen? So you have some data on your laptop. What precautions are going to be in place to protect that data? What will happen to the data following the conclusion of the study? Will it be destroyed? When? Again, consider physical and electronic data. You'll want to shred physical copies, empty the recycle bin on the computer. Just discuss this in this privacy and confidentiality section. You need to have a robust data storage plan, just something that the reviewers can see that you are thinking about the security of your data. And then there are additional attachments to the application. You want to include any survey or research instruments, pre and post tests, permission letters, informed consent forms. If you're doing a verbal interview, you'll want to have a list of questions to be asked. And if HIPAA is applicable, any additional HIPAA forms, recruitment materials, basically anything that is relevant. All right, so how to apply for IRB approval. Applications are completed and submitted electronically to instrb@utc.edu. Student researchers are required to have a faculty advisor. Faculty advisors should review and sign your IRB application, and the faculty advisor should submit the application to the IRB. We have some new tools on the website. We have developed checklists, and these are what I use as the IRB coordinator to pre-review your application when it comes into the Office of Research Integrity. So there's a pre-review checklist that I follow to make sure your application is complete. There's an informed consent checklist, which I also use to check your informed consent and make sure it has all of the required elements. And then the reviewers use a checklist as well. If you use all of these checklists yourself, potentially your turnaround time could be very quick, as long as you've provided all of the complete information. It can also be found on our forms section of our website, utc.edu/IRB/forms. That's where you're going to find your Form A already, so you can just find those checklists on that same page. So the average review times for different categories of research are shown here. It takes about 5 to 7 days for an exempt application, 7 to 10 days for an expedited application. And in the very rare situation that you have a full board review, it could take up to a month. We're going to talk about these different categories of review in just a moment, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the time it might involve to get your application approved. So this length of time for review depends on a number of factors. It's going to depend on, like I said, the category of review, the completeness of your application, and the volume of applications being reviewed by the IRB. These are also averages, so keep that in mind when you're submitting your application. Try to allow a little bit more time. The second bullet point here, the completeness of your application, this is the part that you have control over. So once you submit it to me and I do a pre-review, and I get it back to you, if there are any items that you need to correct, the sooner you get it back to me, the sooner it will go on to the committee for review. The other things, you have less control over, obviously. Now, the volume of applications, the earlier you submit your application, then the quicker it can get reviewed as well. Okay, the process of review. So the Office of Research Integrity, ORI, receives the application via email. ORI conducts pre-review and may request changes. When the application is clear and complete, ORI sends the application to the IRB committee for review. Committee may request additional changes, and then revised applications are then re-reviewed by committee and approved, and the ORI sends out the approval letter. Okay, my thing is missing some pages, but that's okay, I can read up here. So what are the different categories of review? We have exempt, expedited, full board review, continuing or annual renewal, and classroom assignments. How is the category of review determined? The IRB determines the category of review based on the following factors: the level of risk to the participants, the vulnerability of the participant population, the nature of research methods, the selection process of the participants, or whether sensitive or medical information will be collected. Generally, the greater the risk, the greater the review. And you as applicants cannot determine whether your application falls under exempt review or expedited review. That designation can only be made by the IRB chair whenever an application gets in. And if I think it is exempt, I will send it to the IRB chair, and she actually makes that designation and will approve it. So what type of research is considered exempt? Some limited types of research are exempt from IRB monitoring. However, federal regulations, funding agencies, and UTC policy prohibit investigators from making this determination on their own. Okay, I just said this, so there you go. Research may qualify as exempt if it is low-risk research involving normal educational practices, low-risk anonymous tests, surveys, or public observations, or research on existing public or anonymous data or specimens. Some examples of exempt: comparison of instructional techniques or curricula in a classroom, public behavior comparisons, for example, phone usage in Starbucks, or anonymous surveys conducted on Qualtrics of student perceptions. Exceptions: any study that uses vulnerable populations except in existing data sets is not eligible for exemption. Research on these populations requires expedited review. Note, the IRB reserves the right to deny exemption if it determines that the study has more than minimal risk, has ethical concerns, or needs additional investigation. The exempt review procedures The IRB chair determines if research involving human subjects may be considered exempt. Exempt research does not require annual review. However, if the research design or subject population changes, it is the investigator's responsibility to contact the IRB to determine if further review is required. What type of research is considered expedited? Research that is determined to place a human subject at minimal risk in a research setting. That will be expedited. Most social and behavioral science research, certain specific non-invasive methods of specimen collection, and surveys or studies where the participants' information will be kept confidential. Most of the research done here is in this category. Here are some examples. Clinical studies that do not include investigational new drugs or new medical devices, surveys or interviews involving minors or other vulnerable populations, collection of voice, video, or digital data for research purposes, individual or group behavior, surveys, interviews, or oral histories that are confidential but not anonymous. All right, and the procedures differ a little bit here. In this instance, the review is carried out by 2 IRB committee members. The reviewers may approve the application, request changes, or refer the application to the full committee for review. Both reviewers must agree to approve the application, or the application will be sent to the full committee for review. Research classified as expedited is approved for 1 year only. At the end of the year, investigators may apply for renewal if no changes to the study or participant population are anticipated. All changes to the research design or the subject population must be reported to the IRB. If deemed substantial, the IRB may require the submission of a new IRB application. We have a specific form for both the annual renewal and a change request, and it's our Form B. And so that's it will help you determine how you're going to get approved, and we'll review that. Okay, what type of research requires full board review? Any research that involves more than minimal risk to participants requires a full board review. The procedures there, a full quorum of the IRB is assembled, which is at least half of its members. The investigators will present the research project. All members participate in discussion and make comments. Decision is rendered by a majority of the assembled quorum. The board may approve the research, require modifications before approval, or deny the applicant's request for approval. Projects approved under the full board review process require an annual review by the full board committee. Okay, so you're doing your application process. The part that I've mentioned only slightly is that you need to include informed consent. This is a whole topic on its own. Voluntary participation and informed consent is at the very core of the IRB. And informed consent is a process, not a form. Core principles of informed consent. Informed consent must be obtained before the research begins. Information must be understandable. Subjects must have time to consider whether they want to participate. Consent must be given without coercion or undue influence, and subjects must not be made to give up legal rights. Yes?
I have a question on that one. If you're doing surveys or experimental research, like with a case or something like that, it's kind of standard practice to pay somebody something like that in the real world, you know, that they would. But one time I did put that in there, and it was called coercion potentially.
I would have to know about the specific circumstances to be able to answer that question. There can be incentives, but like we mentioned before, it kind of needs to be equitable to what they're doing. So if it's a lot of effort for them to participate in the survey, then it could be a higher incentive. If it's very minimal effort, then it would probably want to be a minimal incentive. For one thing, because you don't want to pay somebody $20 to participate in a very simple research project, because then they feel like, well, I kind of have to participate in this because I really want the $20. It's just a little bit of, I don't know, too much incentive for the project actually being completed. A lot of times I'll see a drawing, so you're sending the survey out to a lot of people, and there's going to be a drawing for a gift certificate. So not everybody is going to receive the incentive. But I'm not sure at this time. Like I said, I need to have more specifics about what would make it coercion versus just a standard incentive. Does that answer your question somewhat? You can call as well. Call and talk to our office, and we'll be able to help you. Okay. There are some exceptions to signed informed consent. So anonymous surveys may not require signed consent, but researchers must still provide participants with a cover letter or introductory remarks that cover all of the elements of informed consent. Here are the standard elements of informed consent. You're going to have an introduction that tells what the study is doing, says that it's research. You're going to identify the principal investigators, the purpose and background, the participation and the time or the duration that is expected, the procedures, the risks and discomforts, the benefits, incentives, confidentiality, how are you going to protect their confidentiality, the contact information. This is for the principal investigators, the faculty advisor, and then there's some information on our website too for contacting the IRB. So that's very important to include. You want to describe the voluntary nature of this research and what will be done with information if participation is discontinued. You want to include that this has been approved by the UTC IRB, any exclusions, and then a line for signature. All right, a section or a note on HIPAA regulations.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
Can verbal consent replace written consent? And then verbal as in, let's say I record it on audio or video. And I'm asking you specifically for if I'm interviewing a population that's not literate, they cannot read or write. And we read, the rights to them and what this is about and explain to them, and then they agree to that, but they don't sign anything. Is that?
I believe that is allowed, especially when it is recorded and you have a script that you're going to say each time. And that obviously will have to be reviewed and approved by the committee. Am I correct in that, Alexa?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There is a lot of flexibility in how you can record consent, depending on the specific situation that you find yourself in. And you'll just need to document that in the application, and you'll submit it to the committee for review.
Yeah. Good question. Okay. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, establishes conditions under which protected health information, or PHI, may be used or disclosed by covered entities for research purposes. If your project is going to involve any PHI, you'll want to submit a Form H, found on our forms site again, and it will help you determine which additional HIPAA forms should be completed and submitted to the IRB. Use the HIPAA compliant informed consent template on our website too, because there will be some additional parts to the informed consent that you'll need to include. Yes?
Yeah, what counts as like protected health information? So if we ask people how much they sleep, I don't think that counts, but where's that line?
Right. Actually, that is a very good question, and that line is sometimes gray. I don't know that I could even answer that question and list all of the different things right now. Alexa, is there a part on our website that discusses
We have
what
a
it
whole
is?
section on the IRB website that talks about HIPAA and talks about protected health information, so I would direct you there. If you have additional questions after reviewing that, please contact us directly and we can work through it with you. Like Bailey said, it can be kind of a very confusing area when you are not a medical professional, say. I mean, certainly if you're dealing with any information that would be on a medical record, that's PHI. Now, if it's just a social behavioral survey where you might ask for height and weight, whether or not that is actually PHI or not PHI is a gray area, and we would discuss that with you. Okay.
Really good question. Okay, and we've seen HIPAA regulations are quite complex. You should consult the full UTC IRB policy for additional guidance. And again, feel free to contact our office. If I don't know, I'll put you in touch with our director, Lindsay Pardue, and she can help answer that. And we also have an IRB committee chair, Dr. Amy Doolittle, in the social work department, and she will also be a good resource. All right, we have a new training requirement. I think that you all sort of talked about that in here. Does anybody know about or not know about this new city training requirement? Okay, good. You're all aware of it. CITI is the Collaborative Institutional Training Initiative. This training project, or training program, the basic course, is very useful, and it's actually kind of interesting reading. You get to see some of the reasons behind what we do and the reasons behind the IRB. You can find information on this training as well as instructions for first-time users or to make sure you have the correct course on our website. You're going to need to take the basic course for either biomedical research investigators or social and behavioral research investigators, and you'll just determine based on your discipline which one you would fall under and take that course. If you register and you've never taken training before but you end up with a refresher course instead of a basic course, you're going to need to start over and make sure you get the basic course. But there's information on our website. Okay. Training must be completed before IRB approval will be granted. One of my pre-review checks is to make sure you've completed the CITI training, and you can still submit your application if you want before you've completed it, but I will be sending back an action form to have that completed, and we'll need to make sure before approval. Yes?
So all investigators on the IRB have to have the training, not just the PI?
Correct. So if you have co-investigators and even the faculty advisor, they all need to have taken the training. All right, so that's the basics. There are some things to consider. The principal investigator has ultimate responsibility for ethical conduct. So respect the time and process necessary for review because IRB approvals are not retroactive. If you are involved in research involving human subjects with another university or organization or in an international venue, other considerations and or procedures may apply. So contact the IRB to discuss these. Additionally, if you are working in collaboration with another university and you're getting IRB approval from them, you still need to contact our office because you may need to get approval from us as well. And we'll just discuss that on an individual basis. The IRB is there to assist by raising issues and asking questions that the PI may have overlooked or failed to consider. But you should consider us to be collaborators. We want you to be conducting ethical research and you want to be conducting ethical research. So we are going to help you do that. And I'm going to do my best to work with you to get your application reviewed and approved. The committee wants you to get approved. So just treat us like your allies in your research project. Our website is full of information and we are continually trying to update it. So you can find our UTC IRB policy, definitions, forms and checklists, instructions for completing and submitting the application. You can find the link to the CITI training there. You can find contact information. And if at any time you can't find the information on our website, again, contact us. And if you see something on our website that needs to be updated, let us know. We're always trying to make it better. Here are some contact information bits for you. At the top, Office of Research Integrity Office, that's how you can get a hold of me. Also, my personal email address is baileywary@utc.edu, but it's really easier and better to use the INSTRB email. I monitor that one daily. Amy Doolittle is our IRB chair. Her contact information is here and on our website. Lindsay Pardue is the director of research integrity, and Alexa McClellan, she's sitting down here with us. She's the assistant director of research integrity, and we can all help you with your IRB questions. But that's all I have for now, so I can take questions. Feel free after we do a general question session, if you have specifics, you can come down and talk to me or Alexa. But there's a question back there, yeah.
Yeah, how often do the IRB forms change? Is it a victim of that?
We try not to change them too regularly. Recently, they've gone through some changes due to policy changes, like the new CITI training. And if they do change, we just try to make them more clear and hopefully easier to use. It is recommended to just always come back to our website to download the new form instead of saving a downloaded copy to your computer, but we'll try to work with you too on an older form. It's just that sometimes the new form has better description of what we need in a section, and that it helps you to make a more complete application. Yeah.
Regarding the informed consent form, and you mentioned that if the research collect anonymous data, you don't need to assign.
Yes.
And then I need a little bit further definition about anonymous, meaning if you don't collect any names or anything, you cannot connect, you cannot identify the person, then you don't need to get assigned, but still you have to give the information about the research.
Yes. Are you still talking about existing data though, or are you
No,
talking
no.
about, okay, so in a different sense?
Yeah, because when I did a survey with patients in the hospital,
Okay.
because, and then the previous ILB asked me to get the signature on the consent form. But my data actually have just, I can only identify the participants by numbers, no names, no anything. So
Is the
I
number
don't-
connected to any private health
No,
information
just
or?
that connected to the data, the data that answers the participant that answered the responses. So still in that case, I still need to get the signature or, anyway, I did it, but
Right.
based on your explanation, it seems like it doesn't need to get a signature.
I'm not 100% sure on all of the details or if I'm understanding you correctly. My understanding would be that if you don't know the participants, just a random person comes in and has an interview with you. It,
Then
But
still,
it's in the, it's a patient, so they're not random, right?
but still, so my question is the definition, what is the definition of anonymous? But even though I don't know the person, the people who answered to my survey,
Mhm.
but I do not collect their actual personal information at all, and then still do I have to get the signature or not? Let's say
it should be anonymous and you shouldn't have to collect the signature. But
But how we
Yeah.
can prove they consented?
that's a good question.
Well, I would say what you need to do in that situation is just to decide what you think is important. You put that on the application, and the committee would then make a further determination based on your specific case whether or not they felt like assigned consent was needed.
Yeah, and then, for example, if I am collecting research with educational setting, in that case, do I need the consent form with a signature? For the students, this is very minimal contact.
Mhm.
If you're
And
doing
then
any contact with
if I don't
students.
collect their names or their grade or anything, just I will, the identifier will be just a number of each participant. And then-
Students are a vulnerable population or minors, and so we're looking at a situation where you want to be extra careful to make sure you get consent.
Well, is it college students or students
College
under 18?
students.
College students?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so in that case, and you asked about documenting consent as far as with an
Yeah,
interview.
yeah.
So that's part of maybe that might be part of why you would get a signature. If you're doing an anonymous Qualtrics survey and it's online, you have no idea who the people are that are filling out your survey, but they also usually click a button or something saying, I agree to these consent terms. I agree to participate. There is a documentation of consent. If you're going to do a verbal interview but not record it, like you asked about recording verbal consent, then there's usually some sort of documentation of consent unless you can obtain a waiver of that documentation. And then with your college students, again, if it's anonymous and if you have a way of documenting consent, whether it's just the cover letter, if it's a paper survey, the cover letter may say, completion of the survey is my consent to participate. That's another way of documenting consent. So I'm not sure about the specifics. Generally, anonymous means I do not know who these people are and I cannot connect their information to the data. Therefore, it's anonymous. And you still need to be able to document consent one way or another, whether it's a signature or return of the survey or clicking this button or
Okay, so as long as the participants say yes, recorded it, but I do not need to get a signature.
Correct. as long as it is anonymous and the committee agrees with that. I'm just, just in case I want to cover my bases here.
About insights for that.
No, just that we're using Qualtrics and that gives us a lot of protection.
Qualtrics is a really easy way of doing anonymous surveys. It's a good way of doing
My
it.
question about the Qualtrics, and this is a specific question though, we're loading it down to SPSS,
Okay.
which pulls a IP address.
Okay.
We're gonna strip those IP addresses, so do we still get to say we're anonymous?
Put that in your application. That's something I would need to check on. And do you have
I can
answer that?
tell her something.
Good.
There's a place in Caltrans, which I always have to check, that says do not collect IP addresses.
Okay, I thought that was the case. I'm not really familiar with that, but I thought I had heard that. So yeah, you can do it in a way that you don't collect IP addresses. That way when it comes to you, it is fully anonymous and you won't be able to.
After the general questions are done, can you show me where that is?
Yeah, I'll study it in a minute.
Did you have another question too?
I just wanted to know about classroom projects.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, with the consent to participate, if they choose not to participate, or then do you give them like an extra credit assignment, or, because they have to have a choice?
Yes. So
And if it's a project, let's say 15 points, are they gonna just get the 15 points by not participating?
no. So you'll want to provide them with another activity to do, like writing a review of an article or some project that is meaningful to their class that would be an extra credit option, and it needs to be equitable. The time and the effort it takes to participate in the research needs to be equitable to the time and effort it takes to do this alternative extra credit option.
So if the survey is 10 minutes, the extra credit needs to take 10 minutes, not 5
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
I have another question on the time, how long does, you explained, exempt cases take only 5 to 7 days review. So that means only the time, that days and only for the time when committee will review the times? When you plan your research, you need to think about how long it'll take, whole process it will take to get through the IRB approval.
Yes.
And how long do I have to prepare, longer than 5 to 7 days if my IRB is exempt? Oh, okay. My question,
Yeah.
I think overall these review times is a lot shorter than I thought. For example, my IRB review took 6 months.
Really?
Yeah, whole thing.
Was
Once I
that
started
at
application-
UTC or was that
No,
somewhere
no,
else?
other
Okay.
university. So I thought that was really fast.
Well, okay, so for one thing, we always try to make our reviews as quick as we can. We say in our application to allow up to 2 weeks of processing, and then again, it comes back to you. So sometimes the committee members need a little nudge. They might take more than a week to review something, but if they take more than a week, I'm going to remind them and say, can you give me the status of this review? Because we really don't want it to take months. But I've had some applications where I've sent an action form back to the PI and I haven't heard back from them in a month or more. And so that would be a delay on the PI's side. So we try to work both ways. I'll even send reminders to the PI if I need to. But we really try to keep it down. And because it's exempt, or if it is exempt, it goes to one person and she's usually pretty quick about turnaround. So it really depends. It depends on how quick the reviewer is going to be, how good your application is, and how clear. So how easy is it to review? And all of those factors play in. So we try to say at least 2 weeks, or at least allow that so that you're not like coming right up to a deadline. And if you really need to start your research and you're really good at your application and made it really clear, you can also let us know. I really would like to start this research at this date. Please do what you can to expedite it, and we'll be as quick as we can.
That means IRB review committee will review as soon as you submit the application. If the completed application submitted, the
We hope so.
reviewers will do that right after that. They don't need to have a kind of meeting or set certain days.
They don't have to have a meeting, no, because they're just going to review it on their own. Like 2 committee members might review an expedited application, or they will review an expedited application, but they review it separately at their own time, at their own leisure. And so then hopefully they'll get it back to me within a few days, but sometimes it takes a little bit longer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, does that help answer your
Yeah.
question? Okay. Yes.
If I receive an exemption before from a different institution, it doesn't mean I'll receive the exemption from this institution, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the IRB will cover just the collection of data and the surveys, but like my whole project, there are surveys involved in it, but that's implementation of education and other things. The IRB is not for that, it's just for the collecting the survey data.
Yeah. Oh, any part of your project that involves the research with the human subjects. So the research part of it, the collection of data and everything is mostly what we're focused on. So I don't think we would.
So the protocols aren't used to collect data, they don't need to be in there. Just the anything that collects data.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, I believe so, unless, I don't know if sometimes people like collect data like a pretest and then they do an implementation
Correct?
to, improve something, and then they'll do a post-test.
Correct.
Okay, that implementation, we need to know about it. We need to make sure that it's not high risk or, so we do need to review that part. That's what's going to be tested is the implementation.
But would all that be covered under one IRB? I don't have to do a pre and post?
Right. So you're going to tell us your whole project. Then we're gonna evaluate the pre-test and the implementation and the post-test. If the pre-implementation and post, all of that is one part of your larger project, we don't necessarily need to know about all of the rest of your project if it doesn't relate to research with human subjects.
Okay.
Yes.
If your research involves two different populations, say I'm doing a survey of supervisors and then a survey of employees,
Mm-hmm.
is that two separate applications or it's all in the same project?
You can put it in the same application.
Okay.
The difference is you're going to have your two separate survey instruments, your two separate informed consent forms that talk about the different procedures for each population. And you'll want to spell out the populations separately in the subject population area. But yeah, it can be one application. Yes?
If I'm using interviews I've collected before in a different institution and a different project, I want to use the same sort of data again.
Mhm.
I need to apply for the
Yes.
IRB.
Yes. So then you'll describe your existing data set, which is what that would fall under, and whether there are identifiers or not, and just describe it, and we'll review it. Yes.
You'll have to forgive me. You said that the IRB applications last for a year, right? After like the point of acceptance?
Yes.
So, okay, let's say I had, for a DHON, for example, let's say I had the research and that it was going to involve people, and of course the DHON isn't due until May of 2018, for example.
Mhm.
That's at the end of, when I'm about to graduate. If I did my IRB application
Today.
now,
Yeah.
exactly, and turned it in, I would have to then submit for the refresh this time next year?
Yes.
Make sure, because even if I had already done the experimentation, I'm then using the data from that previous experiment.
Yeah, your project is still running.
Right.
So even though you've collected it, you would just submit an application for approval.
Yeah.
But it is literally typing in your title and your IRB number and then clicking a box that says annual review, no changes.
Cool.
So it's a very simple process, and it's just to make sure that you get another review of your project, make sure it's still smooth sailing. Yes.
You guys sent us an email saying that we are
We
expiring?
We
or-
try to. We try to. I will say that sometimes, depending on, we have a student worker who helps us do those, and depending on her workload or depending on my workload, whether or not we can get to those reminders, we really try to. We try to send you one a month in advance. However, it is still on you. Now, you can set an Outlook reminder if you use Outlook, or put something on your Gmail calendar or something like that. That would be a safer way to do it, but we really do try to help remind you. Okay. Yes, another question.
About how much time is involved in completing the investigators' basic
Training.
IRB training?
Alexa, have you recently done it? I've actually been in the middle of it, and it takes.
I would say it can take 2 hours,
2 hours?
Yeah.
but it can be broken up because it saves your progress as you go along.
Okay.
So it's a
Yeah.
bunch of different modules within the
Okay.
course, and each module has a short quiz afterwards.
Okay.
The quiz can be retaken, so if you don't pass it the first time, don't worry, take it again. And each module is then saved.
Yeah.
All right.
And I guess it depends on how quickly you read through it, because it's really
Right.
reading a bunch of
A lot of
material and.
Oh, okay. And I know we need to complete that before the IRB app is approved.
Yes.
Is it time bound? Say if I took it today, but I'm not submitting my application for several months, is that?
That is
That'd be a problem.
fine.
It's good for 2 years.
Yeah.
For 2
And then
years,
after the
okay,
2 years,
good.
you can take a refresher course,
All right.
and re-up it.
Are you talking about the city training?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just took it recently, and it depends on if you need the biomedical or the social and behavioral one. Because the biomedical one has 7 modules, the social behavior has 17 modules.
Oh, wow.
So there's a big difference. And then also, if you're familiar with the information, it might take a short time, but if you're actually reading the information to learn, it takes about an hour a module.
And there are, in that 17 module one for the social behavioral, some of them are shorter. So, I mean, it's kind of, but yeah, some of them can take a significant amount of time. So, I would say 2 hours is probably on the low end for the whole thing, but
Well, and if you already know the material.
It's a little
if it's
easier,
new
yeah.
to you, like it was for me, and you actually read it,
Yeah.
it takes quite a while.
yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for coming so much, and we'll see your applications coming through, and hopefully we can get them processed quickly. Thank you.